We'll welcome them as they arrive. My name's Shanna. I'm the CEO and president here at the LA Metro Chamber, and I'm really grateful that you were able to join us today. We have about an hour together, and I don't have any type of formal presentation. I have a lot of information that I can share with you. I'm happy to give you some of the kind of behind the scenes information, some of which had a new evolution just this morning, and I think is actually going to create potentially some change this afternoon. So I'm happy to chat through that with you. But a big function of this time together is making sure I can capture questions for clarity that you might have, which we are constantly in communication with DECD on. And so hopefully I can get you some of that clarity. And we're also really looking for some points of consensus amongst our members that could form some of our advocacy priorities, both with the reopening plan and the staging and some of the other kind of tertiary and related items, significantly employment and human resources that are associated with that. So that's my intention. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for coming. So, and Jason, I see that you're joining by phone, but you're able to type. So are you doing both formats working for you?
Yeah, I can do both.
Okay, great. Well, welcome then.
Thanks.
So, I mean, I think it would be really great to just hear from you some of the kind of overarching questions that you might have. And if you find it useful, I do have some of the links that I shared with you electronically pulled up. And I would draw your attention to the staging link that is the Restarting Maine's Economy Plan. There were some changes made to that. It looks like potentially even as late as yesterday, which I'm happy to call your attention to. And given Airport, Community Little Theater, and Lewiston Rec, you probably won't see a significant change as a result of them, but I think they're worth noting in part because it's an indication that the administration is being or trying to be a little responsive, which I also think means that there's room for movement and change in the way the plan looks. So tell me, what are some of the biggest questions that you're sitting with as you're sitting here in the middle of the pandemic looking at this staged reopening plan?
Well, I know that one of the concerns we have for Community Little Theater is even if we get the green light to reopen, will the people come?
Yeah.
Will they feel comfortable being in an enclosed space? And if they aren't, or if we have to look at things like social distancing, that's going to really impact how many tickets we can sell and therefore what we can expect to earn for income. And those are some real concerns for us.
Yeah. I think while there might not be a lot shared, so some of the areas that we've noted kind of a consistent lack of clarity on and makes really hard to kind of navigate risk and project out what we can expect. But some of that is specifically around the gathering sizes. So there's an acknowledgement that groups up to 50 can meet through stage 2 and stage 3, but that both are creating a prohibition on 50 or more. And right. So, one of the questions that we're naming is, what is the 50 limit based on? Is it difference for indoor or outdoor? Could it be relative to the amount of space and not the amount of people at a kind of cap regardless of the amount of space? So those are questions I've already noted and I will be seeking clarity on, and we'll be giving that feedback to everyone who registered to these. But I think no matter what, John, you can count on physical distancing being a requirement of any opening stage. And for someone like a theater, that's literally removing, 2-3 seats in between every seat that you're allowed to occupy. And that's going to significantly reduce your capacity and your income. That's absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the question that might be worth exploring in terms of a kind of pivot and innovate, and this is challenging giving theater, is what would it look like to move to an outdoor location where you could get more people in a physically distant manner. And I think we're going to see a lot of attempts to move things outdoors, which comes with its own sets of risk of weather in Maine, right? Yeah.
Yeah. One of the other questions that came up related to that is a large cast show can be 35 people. You need probably 10 support people. So does that leave me with an audience of 5? You know, how do those mechanics work in there in terms of the calculus? We're obviously looking at some smaller cast alternatives, but we had 2 really large shows planned for the opener of the season, one which the audience has been waiting for a long time. So we're super excited to have it. And now I'm worried that we won't be able to bring the audience in even if we do it.
Yeah. Yep. It's the same question around whether, you know, the 75 at the grocery store counts the 30 staff that are in the store or not.
Right.
And I
Absolutely.
haven't seen clarity on the response to that. So I'll ask that question specifically.
Okay.
And Jason, I want to invite your voice into, particularly given that you're doing both indoor and outdoor, but, you know, really recreation and seasonal related activities. What are some of the biggest questions that you're sitting with?
Yeah, one of the things we're going to have to deal with is we're working with youth, and it'll be almost nearly impossible to keep social distance with any of our programs. Like the ones that we're trying to figure out if we can hold currently would be t-ball and lacrosse. There's some of the ones that have the least contact, like basketball. We're not looking at anytime soon, especially since it'd be mostly indoor and everybody will contact the same ball. But lacrosse, we think we might be able to do because they're using sticks, they're wearing gloves. It might be something we can work out. So those are the 2 that we're primarily trying to figure out if we can get going. And then we're also waiting for the stage 2 and 3 specific checklist to see if these will even work at all. And then we're going to try our summer camp, but that again will be limited because we'll have to stay under 50 people. And then the amount of staff that we'll need, like John said, you know, our staff will cut into the number of actual participants we can have do the program. So like for a 50, if we have to stay at 50 counting staff, then that puts our summer camp probably down at 35 participants, maybe.
Yeah. I'm taking notes in case I'm not checking Facebook or emailing. I'm taking notes for us because I think these are really important. I also wonder, I mean, and this goes to the question that kind of underpins all of this is that 50 a hard 50 for a camp? Is that a hard 50 for outside? If you do you know, an elementary camp and then a middle school camp and a high school camp, can you get 150 students if they're sectioned off to different areas physically or have different meal times or, and I think those are some of the examples that we feel like could be clarified.
Yeah, I think those are some of the ideas that Auburn Rec was coming up with too, is splitting all their camps up into smaller, very specific aged camps.
Yeah. And is your concern specifically because it'll be harder for youth to maintain physical distance, or because the nature of sports camps ensures that they are within a certain physical distance?
Yeah, I think all of that, keeping kids apart, I mean, we'll be able to set up, you know, cleaning schedules and guidelines to, you know, make everything clean. But then the point of what we do is bringing people together physically most of the time.
Yeah, us too. So I'm feeling that deeply right now.
I know.
What questions do either of you guys have about PPE provisions, either for your staff and volunteers or for those who are using your services?
I think whether kids will have to wear them, because I know, I mean, a lot of the time the kids will need to take if they're wearing face masks, they'll need to take them off a good portion of the day, whether to get water breaks, to get a snack, to get food. Like a good chunk of the summer camp day is eating or drinking just to keep them healthy.
Yeah. John, what about you?
Well, an actor's instrument is their voice and their face. If the face is half covered and the mouth covered over, we got a real problem. I don't even know how much latitude we have within that. You know, would there be a consideration for the fact that the actors are on stage 15 feet away from the audience and therefore they might be able to function without a mask? I don't know.
Yeah. we've had some questions about the availability of those products and how it's possible. So, I mean, for example, Jason, you know, perhaps the teacher or camp counselor, however you refer to it, that's in charge of the small group might only have to wear a mask, but your whoever you have on site as your first aid might have to actually wear a face shield, which salon stylists have to wear as part of the checklist that came out through reopening salons and barbershops. And so I think, you know, without those checklists in place now, and without that clarity around who needs to wear what and how is that linked to effectiveness, because to your point, Jason, you know, wearing a mask all day for kids when they're constantly touching their face to remove the mask is perhaps as risky, if not more risky than not. And so one of the questions that we're hearing kind of clearly is, how is this guidance based on science, and how does that science relate to the ways in which individual circumstances kind of figure out the difference between what's not explicitly laid out in a checklist? I think that's right. To what extent, if any, do either of you, and Rick as well, base your income or your services on folks who might live out of state part or most of the year?
Very minimal for us. Really, we're primarily Androscoggin County, with some of the surrounding counties bringing in some, but our overall income basis is 85% ticket sales. And right now we're not selling tickets and we're not doing shows. So we're concerned.
Yeah. Jason?
Same for us too. It's almost all residents or people from Androscoggin County.
Okay. Some of those changes that happened most recently were around that 14-day quarantine for out-of-state residents. So that's why I won't bore you with the details if it doesn't apply to you. No, these are the right questions, and they're questions I think that we're capturing and paying attention to. Jason, have you felt like you're part of the outdoor recreation? Because day camps is kind of called out specifically in stage 2, which theoretically could be June 1st. And some of that, you know, DECD is talking about pulling specific things forward if they can. For both of you, the testing piece is a really significant piece of what we're looking for guidance on. Go ahead, Jason, sorry.
Yeah, I think getting the appropriate like thermometers and things like that will be hard to do. Just, I mean, supplies are just limited, and getting the ones for, you know, recreation over like healthcare, it's hard to justify us grabbing stuff over some other places.
Yeah, no, that's right.
We would absolutely agree. In fact, we're looking at the reality of canceling our children's program for this summer for exactly that reason. In addition to not having access to the equipment, we've got the question of how many people we can bring in the theater, so that there would, at the current rate, we wouldn't be able to have a show at the end of the workshop, which really takes away a lot of the impact. And we don't have the personnel that really would be qualified for all the medically related questions that could come up.
Do you want to add something, Jason?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think PPE is a big question. Liability as it relates to that, and insurance are two of the other things that are coming up. If it's really hard to get paper masks, which it is hard to get paper disposable masks, are you liable for any type of infection that results from you having given masks? And are you also liable for cleaning those masks and reusing them, or are you just gifting more expensive cloth versions? Particularly, I have kids who don't remember their cloth mask from yesterday, and you have to give a new one every day. I think that's very real for both of you when you're serving youth. We're asking those questions, and I'm hoping to be able to get some information back to folks by Thursday, which is my goal. I've got a pretty responsive contact in the small business department of DECD, so that's kind of my next step in bringing these pieces together. How are you getting sanitizer or wipes or any of those things that are requirements?
Well, so far we haven't. We had some stocked in the theater, prior to the shutdown, but we haven't gotten any new supplies, and we are currently keeping the theater on lockdown. So until we reopen, it's literally just a bridge too far for us. We haven't even gotten to that point.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Jason,
Yeah,
how about
very
you?
similar for us. Yeah. We're kind of just waiting. We're going to get all the plans in place to move forward, but having the sanitizer and having the soap will be definitely an important factor to make sure we can actually pull the trigger and go through these programs.
Do you do your purchasing with the city of Lewiston?
Yeah.
So you'd have some purchasing power potentially because of the size of the city as a whole?
Yeah, I think the physically getting stuff would be not as hard as some other places, but getting it sent to recreation for sports over, protecting the public works staff that go out and are in the field, that might be a hard sell.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yep, those are the right questions. Yeah, I really wish I could bring forward like solutions to you. I will say I was on a call at 11 pretty recently, and we're seeing some sites to the DECD plan for reopening, some changes there, and hearing that the press conference at 2 today will talk about some changes. One of the pieces of information that I've found the most useful and the most telling, without being necessarily helpful, to be really clear, is part of what could really significantly change things for both of you is the availability of quick return testing, right? So your ability to have folks line up a half hour before a show, take the test, or show you that they've had a test within the last 2 days and that they've tested negative, and let them on in and you don't even have to keep a significant distance. That's kind of the difference. And same for you, Jason, with folks who have tested negative at the beginning of the week and get tested every Monday, and being able to run your programs with some consistency and surety. That piece is, so New Hampshire today announced that every resident can get a test at CVS. In Rhode Island, rapid testing is available at CVS and Walgreens. You can go in without an appointment, get a test, and find out your test results within 15-20 minutes. And in our state, we're still limiting tests. Folks who are over 60 are second tier priorities, right? So the first tier really being first responders and medical professional, and those who are actually admitted into the hospitals. And then the second tier being folks over 60 who show symptoms. And so someone like myself who's showing, I'm not currently, but someone like myself who's showing symptoms wouldn't be able to get a test because I'm not in either of those categories. And so, the leap from where we are currently in the state of Maine to the ability to have widespread testing for employers, for customers, the science is there and it is possible. It's a supply chain issue, right? And so we just don't have the supplies available, which is frustrating because 2 of the key components for that supply chain are manufactured right here in Maine. So we've got Abbott Labs that are doing the tests themselves, the rapid testing equipment, and then the nasal swabs are coming out of Guilford, Maine. So that would be a significant difference. And from what I understand, that's the area that the CDC and DECD are finding the most agreement and are working the hardest on. It's been really hard, I think, to nail down the contracts for the supplies that would allow them to make a widespread announcement. And I think that's something that both of you should really be looking for, because that's going to really change the way these guidelines are offered and how you can operate your work. And they haven't been super open about it. These are like whisperings and conversations in the background, but not something that they'll say on the record, which is challenging for the rest of us who are saying, like, we think there's some movement, we think there's some reason to be hopeful, and not being able to link back to a verified source because they're just not ready to go on the record with it yet. What other clarity questions are you guys asking as you look at, and do you want me to pull up and share my screen the stages of reopening? Would that be helpful?
Can't hurt.
Yeah. So this is talking about the health metrics. Have you both accessed this already? So these are the, in the email I shared this with you, and a couple of, just to kind of like walk through what I've shared with you. It is this document, the declaration from the governor. I've shared with you these 3 checklists. So the boatyard, the hunting, fishing, and outdoor activities. And I think paying attention to this might give you some indication of where they're going. Now, recognizing that this is phase 1 guidance, there is no food service inherent in this, and it's pretty explicit about that, which is a bummer for people who go to the show, is a deal breaker for full day care for children. And so I'm just kind of noting that as what we're seeing. And then this one is the golf and disc golf courses. And so this one speaks a little bit, I think, Jason, to some of what the facility and spacing requirements look like for outdoor recreation activities. This is the best glance, as it is specific to your industry, that gets you there. Honestly, John, for you, and I don't know if excuse me as I look, there's, see this post-coronavirus events and meetings?
Yes.
One that I shared with you. This one is one that I would look at, both of you, and I know that you're not necessarily in the business of like weddings, for example, but this has been the most comprehensive and just brazenly honest version of what events might look like. And it does cover, you know, checking temperatures, how you manage lines, event insurance is in here. And I think that's something that you might be considering. And it's expensive, and they're just starting to write it. There was actually inclusion of pandemic insurance as clauses in insurance that came out after the 2012, 2013 SARS pandemic that happened, or epidemic, I think, that happened. And so there is some ability for insurers and underwriters to write those insurance policies and those clauses. They're not inexpensive, and I think you're going to see this pandemic really change what that looks like and the availability and affordability of those. But this gatherings of 50 or more people is a pretty consistent number that I'm seeing in other states' plans, in other nations' plans, across pretty much all industries. One of the questions that we had this morning on a separate one of these conversations for hospitality is, you know, is that 50 based on how many people are in a confined space? Like, how did we get to 50? Why is that the number? And I think it's because of the exponential nature of the way this is a contagious virus. But we haven't seen really good science or rationale behind why it's 50 and not 60, or why it's 50 and not as many people as you can fit into a space with a 6-foot distance around them on all sides. And I think that's part of what we're hearing other people thirst for, that kind of clarity and understanding. I would say, John, for your sake, here at the Chamber, you know, we have in the next 12 months, 4 events that are big events. And every month, breakfast brings in more than 50 people. Almost all business after hours clock around 50 people. And so there's not one aspect of what we do that we aren't seeing being limited by this. And so we're absolutely looking at virtual contributions, other ways that people can participate. I would say theater has had a lovely resurgence of online viewing. And so thinking about what it looks like to give people private access and how you might sweeten the deal for those who choose to virtually join, like being able to have a Q&A with the actors before or after the show, that's a private session for them. But I think, in all honesty, there's no version of clarity that's going to come that's going to change some of these more significant guideposts. And thinking now about how to work within them is probably going to be your best bet at thriving and surviving over the next 12 to 18 months.
One of the difficulties we run into is that royalties and rights sometimes limit what we can do in that regard. So it's been very slow getting answers. Ironically, probably 50 to 60% of all the rights and royalties in the country are pivoted through one particular royalties house, which had just done a major merger with two other houses. So they're in the midst of complete confusion and chaos of trying to put everything together. And then this happened. So a lot of the staff they would normally have on hand has been furloughed. And Manhattan is practically a ghost town in many respects.
Yeah.
So we're having a hard time just getting answers on some of those questions. We've looked into the possibilities, and we've been able to broadcast some of the things we've done in the past, which is kind of right on the edge of what we can do legally. So we are looking at that, but it's still tricky. I hear what you're saying, and we are certainly looking at options within that framework, but we still need several more questions answered before we can proceed forward with that, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. These stages here, this stage one, the one that we're currently in, is still pretty limited. Outdoor recreation isn't really getting to what either of you are into. Stage two expands into day camps for Maine children, which is, I suppose, great news for you, Jason, but doesn't really relate it to these kind of overarching guidelines that are here at the top. And so would that be one of your largest questions, Jason, is that summer camps can run with, social distancing and hygiene and sanitation precautions, but at their regular structure and format? Or is that they're limited to this guidance around 50 people?
I think the structure and how they're expecting the kids to interact. Right now we're planning for July 6th will be our target summer camp start date.
How much off is that than normal for you?
It'll be about a week. We usually go the week after school ends. So I think this year would have been like June 24th, 5th, 6th, sometime around then. So just over a week. So not much later than usual if we can do it.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's there's a version of the answer that says, yeah, of course you can. Look, it's right there, clearly written that you can do it. But it doesn't really acknowledge our operational structures and the way in which we can make a business work, whether it's to scale or not. You can't run a full summer camp with 50 children. Just, you don't make enough revenue at that scale to make the numbers work, right?
Right, and the additional staff we'll need to be able to separate the kids appropriately it's going to increase our expenses by maybe double just staffing alone, just to be able to do this safely.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Trying to be specific to your needs. Both of you are fairly niche. What else can I speak to or ask on your behalf, or advocate for on your behalf that you would find useful?
I think you've already targeted most of the major items, Shanna. The idea of where does the 50 come from? Does it impinge on, would our cast and crew, for example, impinge on the number 50, or would that be 50 in addition to the normal group required? These are all fairly significant questions for us. Would we have any kind of waivers for PPE equipment for cast in a show, so that you can actually see their faces and they can actually project rather than shouting through a mask? These are some biggies that would help us to know, just so we can be planning ahead and maybe anticipating that we'll have to change up the beginning of our 81st season.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Of course. Jason, how about you?
I think pretty similar, just swapping out cast and crew for staff for the most part.
Yeah.
Similar to that, and then figuring out how these kids are actually going to interact safely.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Well, and they're going to have to, it almost feels like summer camps are a first run at figuring out the solution for school.
Right.
I mean, it's the same kids, and we've got to figure out what to do with them in one format or another, sooner rather than later, says a parent of 3.
Yeah.
I really hope they figure it out for you, Jason. Yeah, no, I feel it deeply. I do. Today's my first day in the office in a while, and it feels really nice to have some physical distance from my lovely family. Yeah. Well, so let me ask one last question, which might be more meaningful to you, John, than Jason, but also might not. One of the things that we're hearing from some smaller businesses and organizations is access to some of these supplies and the buying power to buy them at a cheaper rate. And so one of the areas that I'm considering is looking at some of those core supplies that allow a business to open, doing bulk buying on behalf of our members and allowing them to get them at or close to cost, and certainly less than they'd be buying elsewhere. Is that something either of you would be interested in?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It feels like a real barrier to business right now.
It does. It does very much so. And especially when you hear about some of the stories of the gouging that's going on, that's out there, it would be nice to be able to secure something at a reasonable cost.
Yeah, that's what we're looking into. I will be keeping our membership posted on that because it's
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, once we started seeing the requirements for salons and stylists, those are not inexpensive, nor are they easy to find and acquire, and it feels like an opportunity for us to support our members and make sure they can reopen and get back to business with one less headache and burden, right?
I actually got my hair cut yesterday, which is the only reason I could be seen on video now, because I was a shaggy dog. My stylist was not wearing a face mask or a face shield. She did have a mask on, but that was it.
Goggles or glasses?
No goggles, no glasses.
So they offer their preference from face shield to goggles to glasses in that order. We can't, our healthcare workers are reusing face shields every day. So it's mind-boggling that's, I get that it's the safest thing. I mean, it's this, that would be the safest way to walk around in the grocery store too, but it's not a reasonable compromise of resources.
It would also be safer if we only drove our autos at 30 miles an hour, but.
Right. That's a really great point. That is a really great point. I'm going to chase down and get back to you all with whatever answers I can find. I would also say, if you aren't reading them already, try to read my Monday and Friday emails that come out. The Friday ones are a little bit more feel good, though I put any recent updates across the week in there. Mondays are very business oriented, and I'm trying to compile resources for you guys in industries across the nation and beyond, so that we can get a look at what, at the very least, what's informing the decision makers in our state about what they're going to put in place. Because there are some industries, and I would say theater is a big gap, and there's huge question marks around summer camps and youth programming that just are completely unanswered, that I really do have to dig deep and push beyond what is available or being promoted by our state, because they're just areas that feel overlooked right now. And I get why their priorities are in other places, but it's still trying for you. And if you find something useful, I encourage you to share it with me, and I'm happy to share it out as well.
Happy to do so.
Yeah, I would love that. Or if you have an industry publication that you watch regularly, I'll add that to my list of ones that I'm checking around on. I would say I've found some really good supports at McKinsey and Company, and I want to say at least one of the links that I shared to you might be in there. They're definitely on the blogs on laadapts.com, which is a website we put up specifically for kind of business and community in this pandemic time. But McKinsey has offered some pretty good ways to think about leadership of your organizations or your businesses, pivoting and adapting to different types of business models, how to project out costs and things to consider as you navigate adoption of e-commerce or other tech tools that might, in the end of the day, actually provide you some efficiencies while also reducing contact and risk and putting you more likely in compliance. So I'll continue to do that. In the email that I sent each of you today, there is a link to a short survey at the bottom, and that's being shared with all of our members and across the state's chambers so that we can really come through with one voice back to DECD. And as you can imagine, there are some absolute points of consensus where we're hoping for some clarity or some adjustments to the reopening plan. And I want to make sure your voices are represented in that and that we're making sure our members are part of that conversation, which is really at the heart of what this time is for.
Will do.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we appreciate you. We thank you for taking the time to hear us and to give us this forum.
Oh, no, absolutely. It is my pleasure to do so. It's the least we can do, and it's pretty hard to figure out. I mean, you must know this, but the information is changing so rapidly that it feels like a nonstop job just to keep up with it and to make sure that you guys all have the most current information without bogging down your inbox, which I always try to walk that line and not overshare too much.
I wish the people at my company felt that same way.
Yeah, I understand that. I get a lot of emails,
Yeah,
which is why I'm like, oh, that's somebody just got that update on their phone. I don't need to share that same exact link out. Let's,
Right, right.
Yeah, we're trying. Jason, is there any more that I can do for you?
Kind of a separate note, when I reached out to Katie to get registered for this, I wanted to talk to you guys about if you guys wanted to work on partnering with any of the businesses that are chamber members on helping us do Wednesdays in the Park virtually this year.
Oh, I would love to have that conversation with you.
Okay.
Yeah. You want me to set up a time with Katie for you and I?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll email you and her and I will connect and find a time.
Perfect, sounds good.
Thank you.
Everything else has been great. Yeah, just getting all the information and reading your emails helps, and then trying to sort through everybody else's information
a lot of noise out there.
All of the organizations. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I get emails from most of the associations, campground, tourism, hospitality.
Yeah.
You know, I get all of those emails and then, you know, a whole bunch more, quite frankly. And I think, I mean, you can count on my commitment to sharing verified sources when it comes to something that's like immediately affecting you or is current. And the most balanced and holistic view of things that might come. I run pretty center of the road there. I'm really aware and in tune to the politics of a lot of the conversations that we're having and how that's coming across. And I'm really trying to hold a line on making a commitment to our businesses, to their employees, and to our local economy and the communities we serve, which is 100% in line with my mission. So I don't bring the noise, and I do try to cut through it, Jason, because I'm having that experience myself. And there's a lot of, you know, I've got this US Chamber, which is a good resource for a lot of information. And so I stay tapped into that and bring you guys that information. I'm connected with the state chamber. You know, it's interesting because other states have stylists and barbers opening in their final stage because of the close contact that they have with guests, and campgrounds are already open because it's a naturally socially distant activity. And so it's a really interesting thing to watch, a very decentralized approach to how it's happening. It also means there are 49 other experiments happening at the same exact time as us. And so it might also reveal itself in ways to figure out what works quicker than if we were all following the same approach. So that's why I try to stay tuned into what's going on everywhere else and bring you that information as a comparison point usually.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. And if there's anything you love, share it back with me and I'll make sure it gets out into the world as well. I'm always grateful for that.
You want more things to read?
Yeah.
I have really excellent filters on my email, really good ones.
Perfect.
You sent me one with a recommendation. I would absolutely take it though. I would. I do a lot of reading.
Okay.
A lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank
Shanna,
you guys.
on a completely side note,
Yeah.
have the 40 under 40 been voted on at this time? I have not heard, and we had 3 people in the arts category, so I was kind of
I
curious.
know, it's got to be killing you. We're really sorry about that. I have 2 meetings this week about that. So what I can tell you publicly are these specific pieces. One, we do have a rescheduled date. We'll be announcing it soon, and it's in the fall.
Okay.
2, normally we would have already announced a whole bunch of stuff, let alone almost held the event. And so everything's kind of stretched out a little bit. So the honorees, and so this year there was a little bit of a shift in the program. It took a year off last year. We had heard the concerns from folks about it being just a popularity contest. And so also, if we continue to award 40 awards every year, and if you've been awarded before, you can't be nominated, really makes it hard in a community of this size. So this year, there was 53 that were voted on, which is what you're referencing. The votes will be used to define the 4 honorees per category, which is how we'll get to our 40. That vote has happened. They have been tallied. The steering committee does not know what the outcome of that vote is yet. And I think next Tuesday or the Tuesday after they will. And you'll start to see the 4 honorees per category at 1 category a week over the next, like I think it's from like June 8th through July 14th. It's 10 weeks, 1 for each category. And because there's so much more time now between when we were supposed to have the award program and we're actually having it, we're kind of sharing out each individual honoree story instead of kind of lumping them together into a category so they get their own moment in the spotlight, which your 3 should appreciate, should they have made it through. At the end of the day, though, there is an awardee that is going to be selected. So there will be 10 people, 1 from each category, who get a physical award and an extra level of kind of recognition the night of the ceremony. And no one will know who those awardees are until the night of the ceremony.
Excellent.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a little element of surprise that we're building in, but everybody who makes it to the ceremony is being honored. So yeah, that's new this year. That's a new improvement. And so yes, you should know who the 40 honorees are within like 3 or 4 weeks.
Excellent.
They have been notified. I think the 40 honorees have been notified and asked to be quiet about it. And they're doing an amazing job, clearly. Yeah, it's got to be killing you. I'm really sorry.
Well, really and at a time when gossip would normally be flying, I haven't heard a word, which is really unusual. So
they're doing a really great job.
Yeah,
they are doing a really great job. Yeah, and we're excited about it.
Good deal. We are starving for some good news and some good things every now and then. So that would be a nice piece to hear.
Yeah, that's part of why we didn't want to, I mean, because normally all 4 honorees are named in a category post. The category post is, there's 2 categories a week, and in five weeks, everybody's been named and they all got it at once, and you had to share your spotlight with everyone else. We were like, there's going to be a desire for some good news this summer, and we're going to take the time to celebrate each one individually. So bear with us as we put that together, but that is coming.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's a great thing. I'm very happy to see that.
Thank you. Thanks. We're really excited about the event, and we're trying to figure out a couple of, that's why I mentioned it, a couple of remote viewing opportunities for folks, because who knows what September is going to bring, and try to figure out how we can blend an in-person and virtual environment. I think for us, we'll be planning on everything that we offer having a virtual component going forward, because there are folks who are going to be at risk who are going to not be able to or choose to stay at home.
Exactly.
So we have to be inclusive of them, and it's an interesting space to navigate. It means that we'll always have a fallback policy, an option, that if there was, if suddenly we ratchet back to a prior phase of restrictions, we'll already have something built into place.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your time and your good thinking. My pleasure. Have a great day.
Thank you. You as well.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And thank you, Rick.
Yeah, thank you. Talk to you later.
I appreciate it. And I did grab that. And that was one of the plans that I shared, was from that association.
Yeah, well, this just apparently just got published. It's for hotels.
Yep.
But it can be adapted.
No, it's great. That I think that exact link in the hospitality email that I shared this morning was from that association.
Yeah, I think it was too, but it wasn't this.
Okay, I'll check that out.
Okay. Alrighty.
Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.